Gonzaga is in pursuit of two elite transfer portal guards. Which of Desmond, Claude, or Tyon Grant-Foster is the best fit in Spokane?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, folks, Gonzaga has been in contact with a pair of outstanding transfer portal guards, USC guard Desmond, Claude, as well as Grand Canyon guard Tyon Grant-Foster. We've spoken about both of them in previous episodes of Locked On Zags, but today we're going to compare the two. We're going to make the case for why Desmond, Claude is the best fit in Spokane in the first segment. Then we'll talk about Tyon Grant-Foster's case in the second segment. And then we'll close out the show comparing the two of them. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And which might be a better fit with this specific iteration of the Gonzaga Bulldogs, who fits best alongside Braden Smith, Adam Miller, Jalen Warley, and the rest of Gonzaga's backcourt. We'll get to all of that to close out the show. We'll start, like I said, talking about Desmond, Claude, the more notable name, just in the sense that he's a bit more highly regarded in most of the transfer portal rankings. He's coming from a power conference program, not the case for Tyon Grant-Foster. Desmond Claude, 6'5", rising senior guard with 1 year of eligibility remaining. He spent 2 years at Xavier playing for Coach Sean Miller before last year transferring to USC. Following Eric Musselman, the Muss Bus, to the Trojans in the Big Ten. USC did not have a great year, finished 14th in the Big Ten Conference, but that wasn't because of any issues with Desmond Claude. He was great, averaged just under 16 points, 4 assists, 3.5 rebounds, shot about 53% on his 2-point attempts. He did shoot just under 31% from three and was very good at getting to the free throw line, a little under 6 attempts per game, and was good at the free throw line as well, about 76.5%. Right now, the names to watch for Desmond Claude, one popped up just about an hour before we hit the record button here on Thursday afternoon. By the way, shout out to those of you joining us live. I appreciate having you hanging out with us Thursday afternoon. Alabama is going to host Desmond Claude on a visit starting Sunday. That is a big-time team to get into the mix for Desmond Claude. Could certainly throw a wrench into Gonzaga's plans to land the 6'5" guard. The Crimson Tide found out that LeBaron Philon, their star freshman last year, is all in on staying in the NBA draft process. I don't think that was a big surprise necessarily, but it could be why they are maybe pivoting towards trying to find some more backcourt help. Certainly Claude is, if not the most, he's probably not the most notable. PJ Haggerty, RJ Lewis are probably the most notable guards in the transfer portal right now, but as well as Boogie Fland, who we spoke about on Wednesday's episode. But Claude is certainly one of the most prolific names in the portal. Bama being a school to watch, as well as Florida, Washington, and Ole Miss. Florida is heavily involved in landing Boogie Fland. If they do get Boogie Fland, the combination of Fland and Xavion Lee, the transfer from Princeton, would certainly take them out of the running for Desmond Claude. So if you're looking for some good news, that would be your good news. Ole Miss has been in the mix as well. They got that SEC money, so that could be a team to keep an eye on. And Washington is pursuing allegedly both Claude and Tyon Grant-Foster. They're not going to get both of them, so it's possible that Gonzaga is able to get one of the two as well. In terms of the pros for Desmond Claude, he is a true on-ball facilitating point guard type. And we know that Mark Few loves having 2 point guard lineups. This has been a staple of this program's success since Few took over 25 years ago. The two Gonzaga programs that have gone to the national championship game in 2017 and 2021 were both led by starting lineups that featured effectively 2 point guards. In 2017, it was Nigel Williams-Goss and Josh Perkins. In 2021, it was Jalen Suggs and Andrew Nembhard. So I think that is the biggest selling point for Claude, is that he is a secondary point guard. He would play alongside Braden Smith, and he offers size at the position. I think, the last couple of years, Gonzaga has in theory had a 2 point guard lineup. Nolan Hickman didn't really thrive in the point guard role when he was given the keys to that role as a sophomore. But he was somebody who could be a secondary creator, who could, if they needed him to be on ball when Nembhard was sitting, or even when he was struggling over the last 2 years, Gonzaga would run the pick and roll with Hickman. Like, they would let him initiate the offense. But the problem the last couple of years was the fact that Nembhard and Hickman were both not very big, and we saw that limit Gonzaga defensively. In fact, Gonzaga's exhibition game this last year was against USC, and the reason they lost that exhibition game was because in the second half, Desmond Claude went crazy posting up Ryan Nembhard and basically just dominating, using his size as a strength against this team. And I think he would be more than capable of doing that in the WCC this upcoming season. He's also great at getting to the free throw line. I think he could abuse the smaller guards in the WCC, get his touches, get his looks at the charity stripe. He's a gravity player. He commands attention with the basketball. I think he comes from a USC team that did not have an interior post presence offensively really at all. They had them at Xavier. Zach Fremantle was great in particular. So he's a bit more used to that from his time at Xavier. But I think having offensive weapons around him that are post players could really help Claude thrive and succeed in Spokane. The cons for Desmond Claude: he's not a good three-point shooter. And honestly, that's putting it politely. For his career in 3 seasons, 2 of them as a very high usage player, Desmond Claude is a career 27.1% three-point shooter. He's only been over 30% for a full season once. That was last year, 30.7%. He's not a high volume three-point shooter, 2.3 attempts per game last year. I think he's always been around that 2.5 3-point attempts per game. So he doesn't shoot a lot of them. It's not like he's bricking shots constantly, but he is not a floor spacer. He is not bringing that to Gonzaga. Is it possible that he would materialize as a better three-point shooter in an offense where the defenders are more focused on the post? Yeah, it is. But it's been 3 years of Desmond Claude playing college basketball, and he's never looked like a good three-point shooter. I would be surprised. As much as I love to talk about the Ryan Woolridge effect, I'd be surprised to see that happen here. It's just not a part of his game. Outside of that, the next biggest con for Claude, he is a turnover machine. He's a super high usage player, so you expect guys who have the ball in their hands all the time are going to have turnover issues. A guy who had the ball in his hands all the time on a team last year where the roster construction was a little bit shaky and basically nobody had ever played together before. I'm not surprised that the turnover numbers were very high. And I think that the concerns about him in that specific space are limited by the fact that he's not necessarily going to have the ball in his hands the same amount of time as he did at USC. If he comes to Gonzaga, he's playing a bit more off the ball. I think he's still going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And I think between him and Smith, you will see, like, when Nembhard was the point guard, it was always Nembhard 100% of the time. If Smith and Claude are in the backcourt together, I think it might be a little bit more, they might spread the love a little bit more, but ultimately I don't think Claude's turnover concerns would be as prevalent in Gonzaga's system as they were in USC's system. His turnover issues weren't as significant at Xavier, for example, but they were still there. And I mean, again, we're 3.5 turnovers per game is a ton. He had over 4 assists per game, which is also great, but he had 115 turnovers last year. That was 3rd in the Big Ten. That was 14th in the country. He turned it over a lot. And then the last kind of knock on Claude, he's an okay defender. He doesn't generate a lot of like defensive stocks, as they call them, which is the combination of steals and blocks. He didn't get many of those. You're not expecting your secondary point guard to be a shot blocker necessarily, but he doesn't get a ton of steals. He doesn't force turnovers. He's an adequate defensive player. But for a Gonzaga team that has great defensive wings already in Emmanuel Innocente and Jalen Warley, I don't think that Claude's like lack of being a super great on-ball defender is necessarily a huge concern, but it is not something that he brings to the table as much as maybe somebody else like Tyon Grant Foster, which is what I want to talk about now. Grant Foster is a jumbo guard. He is elite at getting downhill. He commands a ton of attention with the basketball in his hands, loves getting to the free throw line. Is he a better fit with the skills that he brings to Gonzaga than Desmond Claude? We're going to make the case for Tyon Grant Foster coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you have to experience live. and this year's matchups have completely delivered. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a complete game changer. I love that I can see the exact view from my seat before I buy. There are no surprises. And with the Game Time guarantee, you know you're getting the very best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game 6, New York Knicks, Boston Celtics. It is a powerhouse game on Friday. Tickets, they're not cheap, folks, but you can get yourself into the door of basketball mecca, the Madison Square Garden, for a little over $650 by using Game Time. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still comparing Gonzaga's two highly regarded transfer portal targets in the backcourt, Desmond Claude and Tyon Grant Foster. We talked about Desmond Claude in the first segment, the USC transfer, the pros, his successful facilitating skills, his playmaking. We talked about the cons, the outside shooting, the defense. Now we're going to do the same thing with Tyon Grant Foster, and then we're going to close out the show kind of more directly comparing the two of them to close out the show. Tyon Grant Foster, 6'7" senior with 1 year of eligibility remaining. He has had quite the journey in his college basketball career. Has been most recently at Grand Canyon, but he actually started at the junior college level in 2018. Played 2 years of JUCO ball, came to Kansas in the 2020-21 season, played 22 games as a freshman with the Jayhawks. Then he transferred to DePaul. He only played one game at DePaul in the 21-22 season, really only played one half. He collapsed at halftime, ended up having heart surgery, had multiple complications from that, cost him the entire rest of that year and the entire 2022-23 season. He was told point blank by medical professionals that he would never play basketball again. Fortunately for him, those doctors were incorrect, and he was able to return to the court for Grand Canyon in the WAC in the 23-24 season. Not only did Grant Foster return, he was the WAC player of the year. He was one of the best players in college basketball. And this is in 23-24. He averaged 20.6 boards, 1.5 assists, 1.7 steals, 1.5 blocks, 50% on two-pointers. That was on nearly 10 attempts per game, 33% from three on about 4.5 attempts per game, 75% from the free throw line on over 8 attempts per game. Tyon Grant Foster was an incredibly high usage guard. He had the ball in his hands every dang possession for the Lopes. He was, again, we're talking 10 two-point attempts, 5 three-point attempts, 8 free throw attempts per game. Basically every shot going up, Tyon Grant Foster had a hand in it. He played great for them throughout the season, played great for them in the first round of the NCAA tournament when they upset St. Mary's. And then he came back. And that was a shocker because he was already a very old college basketball prospect. He comes back to Grand Canyon, doesn't enter the transfer portal, pulls his name out of the NBA draft process, and unfortunately, it didn't really go well for him. He dealt with injuries last year, and when he was on the floor, he just didn't play nearly as well. Dropped from 20 points to about 15 points per game. His assists were a little better, 2 assists as opposed to 1.5, but his rebounding was about the same. His 2-point shooting was about the same as well, dropped from 50 to 48, but his 3-point shot, which was only 33% as a junior, so it wasn't great then, plummeted last year. Folks, he shot 23% from three last year. He also only shot 68.5% from the free throw line, although he did take 7 free throw attempts per game. Grant Foster has been in the transfer portal for a while. There's been some names, some teams that have been floated around, but nothing that has really stuck. Michigan State was the closest. There was reports all over social media about a month ago that he was a lock to go to Michigan State, that the commitment was just days away. Hasn't happened, didn't happen. Maybe it still will, but it seems like that has more or less died out. Washington is in the mix. Gonzaga is in the mix. A few other schools that have been in the mix at times include Syracuse, Pitt, Miami, a handful of others. I imagine many high-profile, high-major programs have at least checked in on Grant Foster over the last few months as he has been available in the portal. The pros for Tyon Grant Foster for Gonzaga. He is an elite size for his position. He is 6'7". We mentioned that as a pro for Claude as well, but Foster's even bigger. He's even longer. He is a matchup problem in the WCC. If he was starting alongside Braden Smith, alongside either Adam Miller or Jalen Warley in Gonzaga's backcourt, he provides so much length, so much difficulty just in terms of especially WCC teams trying to match up with that size on the perimeter for Grant Foster. He is also great at driving to the basket. He's slippery. He loves fighting through contact. He loves getting to the free throw line. He's very, very good at that. His free throw shooting leaves a little bit to be desired. It would be interesting to have a player who's as good, if not better, than Caleb Battle at getting to the line, but certainly not as good as Caleb Battle at converting from the line. But the main thing for Grant Foster, and to an extent Claude, although he's got more of a passing mentality, Grant Foster is a scorer. He is a score-first player. He wants the ball in his hands because he wants to score. He's not looking to facilitate. He's not looking to get teammates open. He's not looking to run actions. He's not looking to make entry passes. The man is looking to score. And I put this in the pros, but there are some cons to that as well. And I think that is the question that Gonzaga has to answer is, does his fit make sense? Because the talent is there, but is he somebody who is best served being in an offense where he gets to create for himself and doesn't really have to worry about doing anything else? Grant Foster's a better basketball player than Mike Ajayi, so I don't want to make the straight across comparison. He's more similar to Caleb Battle, but Mike Ajayi struggled because he was used to being the guy where he didn't have to look to make passes or make reads. He just looked to try to score the basketball. Caleb Battle was a little bit better at making those reads, but he'd been kind of used to being that kind of guy as well. Grant Foster is that guy, and I think the question for Gonzaga is, can he adjust? Or the question is, do we want him to? Are we okay with him being somebody where, hey, a play breaks down, we get him the ball and let him go to work? He's a menace in transition. We let him do all these great things, but in the half-court offense, maybe he's not asked to fill a traditional role as much as he's asked to, like, hey, if you have the ball in your hands and you think you can create a mismatch, go for it. And that, again, that's something that Gonzaga has to weigh whether they want to deal with that and kind of allow him to fill the role that he's more comfortable or try to make him make adjustments. The other pros for Tyon Grant Foster, he's a very good defender. His size, his length is so disruptive in the WCC. He's averaged over 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks per game each of the past 2 years. Again, you're not bringing in Tyon Grant Foster to be a shot blocker, but the fact that he has blocked a lot of shots, he has gotten a lot of steals, generates a lot of turnovers is good news for Gonzaga. He's an incredibly experienced player. I think he would thrive on a more talented roster than he had at Grand Canyon. He's also a good rebounding guard. There's a lot of things to really like about what Grant Foster would bring theoretically to the Zags were he to commit to Spokane. The cons for Grant Foster, some of them are the same as the cons for Desmond Claude. Neither of these guys shoot the rock very well. We mentioned Desmond Claude's a 27% career three-point shooter. Tyon Grant Foster's 28. Neither of these guys are good outside shooters. Career 28% three-point shooter for Grant Foster, career averaging over 3 attempts per game. So unlike Claude, Grant Foster does take more threes than Claude does. And I think, again, that's in part a product of playing for a team that most of the damage he's done in college has been at Grand Canyon, where he was the focal point offensively. Desmond Claude is the facilitator, but he's not somebody who takes as many shots as Grant Foster. So I'm not surprised that Tyon has more three-point shooting, a bigger volume of three-point shooting throughout his career. The other cons for Grant Foster, I mean, it's certainly notable that his numbers all kind of cratered from his really prolific first season at Grand Canyon to his second year. He got worse in almost every way. And injuries were a part of that, but they're a part of the conversation here too. It seems like the heart issue is more or less resolved. I don't think that necessarily should be used as a knock against him, but he's an older prospect. He's dealt with injuries. There's a bit of a risk in bringing him in the sense of, you want to get him for a full 30, 32 games. And if you don't, you're spending a lot of money and you're bringing in a player over other options who, the best availability. You got to be able to play. And I think that is a concern with Grant Foster, is how available will he be for the team. And then we mentioned he's great at getting to the free throw line, but for his career, he's a 71.5% free throw shooter. That's not terrible. But if this is the guy who's going to be constantly getting downhill, who's going to be constantly trying to create offense, and he's, only barely above 70% from the line, that's not doing you as much good as you'd like it to. And then I think the other biggest thing, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and we'll talk about more here in the final segment, he's not a facilitator. Tyon Grant Foster is a scorer. His career 1.4 assists per game. Career 1.4 assists per game. 2 turnovers per game, which isn't that bad, especially for a guy who has the ball in his hands as much as he does, but he's not a playmaker. He's not looking to pass the ball. He's not looking to do anything other than try to score as every single time he gets the basketball. And again, I think there could be a place for that, but Mark Few and the staff have to determine if that's the kind of player they want to add to this roster. And that's kind of what I want to get into now, because Desmond Claude's the better playmaker. But Tyon Grant Foster is bigger. He is a better defender, and he is more of a score-first mentality. So who's the right fit for Coach Few and the Zags? We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it is the perfect time for you to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, Wayfair has everything that you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation seats to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. So grab a new patio dining set and some string lights from Wayfair to help extend your outdoor space. Whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing solo on that outdoor couch, shop Wayfair to help you unwind. I love the mix of styles that Wayfair has to offer. They make it super easy to find pieces that match your vibe, and you don't have to spend a fortune. The delivery is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. So shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's wayfair.com. Every style, every home. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're closing out the show comparing Desmond Claude and Tyon Grant Foster straight across to each other after talking about Desmond Claude in the first segment and Tyon Grant Foster in the second segment. I want to take a look kind of at the pros and cons for each in terms of how they fit this current roster. We were talking more broadly about their skills, their strengths, their weaknesses. Now I want to talk more about what it means in terms of how they would fit this team and this group of players heading into the 25-26 college basketball season for Mark Few and the Zags. We'll start with Desmond Claude. The pros for Claude: he's a better passer, he's a better facilitator. He is more of a traditional point guard. That's not Tyon Grant Foster's role. And it absolutely is what Desmond Claude does. And again, we talked about that in the first segment. Mark Few tends to like having a secondary kind of facilitator, creator, a secondary ball handler type in those starting lineups. We saw it with Nembhard and Hickman. We saw it with, Suggs and Nembhard in the past, and going back to Perkins and Nigel Williams-Goss for that 2017 team. This is what Mark Few likes to do. And a starting lineup that features both Braden Smith and Desmond Claude absolutely has two very good playmakers, facilitators, setting up the offense in that starting lineup. And I think that based on what we know about Coach Few and how they like to operate, that makes a ton of sense to me. Desmond Claude is also a more efficient scorer. The efficiency between Claude and Grant Foster is fairly similar, but Claude's done it in the Big East and the Big Ten. Whereas Grant Foster, he played very little at Kansas as a freshman. He played a half at DePaul, and then he played the last 2 years in the WAC. And so for Claude to have similar efficiency numbers while playing in better conferences makes me feel more confident about his efficiency as a scorer. Again, neither of them are three-point shooters. That's pretty much a wash. Both of them are bad in that space. But as offensive players outside of that, as two-point scorers, as finishers around the rim, Claude is more efficient in that space. I also think Desmond Claude is more comfortable fitting into an offense with talented pieces around him. He did that both at Xavier and at USC. And yeah, the turnover issues were a problem for him last year, but Claude looked comfortable playing a very big role, but a role with talented teammates around him, whether it was St. Thomas, whether it was any of the other talented players on that USC team. Terrence Williams was a big one. Chibuzo Agbo from Boise State was a big one. Josh Cohen, they had a lot of really, Wesley Yates, who was incredible in the second half of the year. Claude was able to adjust to his talented teammates. We've seen him do that. It doesn't mean Grant Foster can't, but we haven't really seen him have to do that yet. I also think that Claude is less risky in terms of productivity. Like the highs for Tyon Grant Foster are really high, but the lows are very low. Whereas with Claude, he's a bit steadier, kind of in the middle. The upside is maybe not quite as high as it could be for Grant Foster, but the floor is certainly higher for Desmond Claude. The pros for Grant Foster: he's bigger. He's more likely to be a matchup problem for opponents in the WCC. He's got 2 inches on Desmond Claude. He's really long. He's really rangy. He's also a better defensive player. And while I think Gonzaga has done a good job of adding talented defensive players to this team's backcourt already, in Jalen Warley and Emmanuel Innocente most notably, having more length, more disruption defensively on the perimeter is never a bad thing. And while Claude is not bad, he's not great. And Tyon Grant Foster is more likely to generate steals. He is more likely to make things happen defensively. He is more likely to frustrate opposing guards just by virtue of being so big and long. And I think that is a big advantage that he has. Grant Foster is also really good at getting to the free throw line. And he's just more of a gravity scorer. He's taking attention from opposing defenses in a way that Claude isn't necessarily doing. Now, Claude is out there working to get teammates open looks and is going to be really challenging on opposing defenses because it creates 2 playmaking guards on the roster or on the floor at the same time in many cases. But Grant Foster is such a dynamic scoring guard and such a weapon offensively that he's going to command a lot of attention from opposing defenses as well. So in terms of who fits better, I think it's hard to go against Desmond Claude because of the playmaking abilities, because of the talent level that he faced in the Big Ten and at in the Big East, and because of Gonzaga's love of those 2 guard lineups, those 2 point guard lineups. I think if you were to make projected starting lineups with either of these additions, I do think they're slightly different. I think if Claude is starting for Gonzaga, or if Claude comes to Gonzaga, he's definitely starting. I think he's pushing Adam Miller to the bench. I think your starting lineup is Smith, Claude, Warley, Huff, and Ike. Jalen Warley is also a bit of a facilitator, so you kind of have 3 facilitating guards on the floor at the same time, along with 2 very talented scoring bigs. That lineup is offensively excellent. Jalen Warley is your 5th option offensively. He's not a great scorer, but he didn't have to be in that lineup because there's so many great scorers around him, and he's a tremendous defender. And I think Warley's presence kind of mitigates some of Claude's defensive concerns, or Smith's defensive concerns for that matter. Whereas if Tyon Grant Foster is in the starting lineup, I think you probably push Warley to the bench. Maybe not. Maybe you start Smith, Grant Foster, Warley, Huff, and Ike. But you don't have a lot of shooting. And again, the previous starting lineup that we mentioned, Smith, Claude, Warley, doesn't have a lot of shooting either. Whereas if you start Smith, Miller, Tyon Grant Foster, Huff, and Ike, then at least you got that 3-point shooting from Miller. You still have the length of Tyon Grant Foster, so it kind of mitigates the fact that Smith and Miller are both 6'3" or shorter. But I think it is a slight change in that starting lineup, potentially, if Grant Foster were there, but they have some options that they could do there. Grant Foster, again, more of a Caleb Battle type role. And I think if Gonzaga wants more playmaking out of their guard addition, then they would much rather have Desmond Claude. But if they're looking for, we just need somebody who can go get us a bucket, who can take some defensive pressure away from our bigs, who can score around the rim, then certainly Grant Foster is the guy you're going to want to go for in that case, even though Desmond Claude can do those things as well. Closing out the show here to talk some using the data from Evan Miyakawa's website. I've been using this the last couple of weeks here on the show for those of you who are regular listeners. The website, you plug in any player in college basketball and it gives you their percentiles in various statistical categories projected for this upcoming season based on their previous performance, their scouting reports, adjusted for the quality of opponent, all sorts of good stuff. Evan does a tremendous job with this stuff. The overall projections also project Desmond Claude to be the more impactful player, and that's not really a surprise to me. Overall, though, both of them very highly regarded. Their overall percentiles in college hoops, Claude is 98, Tyon Grant Foster is 89th. Offensively, 97th and 86th, respectively. Defensively, 97th for Claude, 91st for Grant Foster. A little surprised at how highly regarded Claude is defensively by Evan's data, but I think that's a product of playing in tough competition and tough conferences for the last couple of years. Individual skills, a few that stood out to me. Scoring volume, both of these guys really high in that regard. 95th for Claude, 98th for Grant Foster. Offensive impact, Desmond Claude 80th percentile, Grant Foster all the way down at 38th. That stands out to me a little bit. Neither of them are three-point shooters. We know that. But some other stuff that stands out, defensive impact 75th and 68th, so fairly similar there. Playmaking is perhaps the biggest difference, and it's what we've talked about a ton so far on this show. Desmond Claude, 78th percentile for playmaking. Tyon Grant Foster, 19th. Your boy's not a playmaker. He's not a playmaker. That's a huge difference between the two of them. However, defensively, there's a big advantage here. Desmond Claude, 36th percentile in steals. Tyon Grant Foster, 95th percentile in steals. So certainly projected to be more impactful on that end of the floor. Free throws, 70th percentile for Claude, 40th percentile for Grant Foster. I think that's primarily evaluating your free throw percentage and not your volume, because a guy who gets to the line 7 times per game and makes them 73% of the time, like Grant Foster's done in his career, it's hard to say that that's a 40th percentile outcome as a free throw shooter. You'd like him to shoot a better percentage, but the volume of free throw attempts is a valuable thing for Gonzaga if Grant Foster were to commit to the program. That's going to wrap it up for me today, folks. The overall conclusion, if I was picking between the two, I'd probably pick Desmond Claude, but Gonzaga is going to be happy with either. I think if they don't get either of them, then it's a little bit more concerning. The options outside of the two of them start to dwindle pretty fast. But if you get one of them, if the Zags end up with Grant Foster, I don't think we need to be like, oh, well, they could have had Claude. It's going to work out fine. There'll be some adjustments in how they operate the offense, but both these players would be a huge value add to this Gonzaga roster next season. Hopefully we'll get updates on them in the not too distant future. Again, we said Claude taking that visit to Alabama, so that could be a challenge for Gonzaga, but we'll see if they're able to stay in the mix there, or if they maybe put all their chips in the Grant Foster basket. We'll see what happens there. But folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. I want to thank all of you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to the everyday listeners. We'll have one more show for you on Friday to get you out of the week. And then next week, we'll be continuing to talk transfer portal. We'll talk about Ryan Nembhard's performance at the NBA Draft Combine, what that means for him going forward. All that and more coming your way on future episodes of Locked On Zags. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.